Last week, Jeffrey Sachs appeared in front of the European Parliament, and what he said wasn't just controversial. It was the truth no one in power wants you to hear. The US has no interest in peace, only control. Europe's foreign policy is made in Washington, and Washington's foreign policy is taking orders from Tel Aviv. Jeffrey Sachs has spent decades inside of the system, advising world leaders, sitting in on major negotiations, watching up close as the world's most powerful people lied to our faces. And now he lays out all of the wars we've been marched into at the behest of Israel while simultaneously trying to annoy Russia, hoping to weaken it or collapse it. So, what does this mean for us? Trump may very well end the war in Ukraine, which will save lives. But if Washington is controlled by Israel, will a new war emerge, this time against Iran? And before we get into my conversation with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, I want you to hear this for yourself. So, what I've done is I've cut about 15 minutes worth of highlights from the hour-long speech. Here it is. Professor Sachs, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So tell us about the reception to this speech at the EU Parliament. Did you get much pushback? Are they saying, yes, we need to listen to you? I mean, what's the EU seems to be full on going forward with the Ukraine war. They're not listening.
It's amazing. I did not get any reaction from the leadership, meaning the European Union Commission or the High Representative for External Affairs. But I got a lot of feedback, and most of it very positive, from within the European Parliament and from a lot of people around the European Union institutions saying, thank you. Yes, we do need our own foreign policy. It's been a long time. Now,
well, it sounds like they're starting to develop one. I mean, some of the things that are being said in the news is they're thinking about creating their own NATO, I guess, without the United States,
yeah.
or which fine, if they want to do that and they want to create that makes sense to me without the United States being involved.
Yes, NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, meaning that it is bridging the North Atlantic. On one side, the United States, of course, is the leader of this alliance, together with Canada, and on the other side, Britain and the European Union and a few other European countries not in the EU. But Europe gave up its foreign policy to NATO years ago. Basically, the United States called the shots for what Europe would do, I would say, at least for, since 2008. It's been hard to think of a moment when a major European leader said no to the U.S. foreign policy. 2008, by the way, is an important date. It was the date that the U.S. pushed through the commitment that NATO would enlarge to Ukraine and to Georgia, which put us on a path to war with Russia. And the Europeans were against it, but they swallowed their opposition, went silent, and really since then have not had an independent foreign policy. So Europe is recognizing, especially in the age of Trump, who's all over the place. We want Greenland, we want this, we want that. Yeah, maybe we better do something ourselves. I'm in favor of that. I think Europe should have its own foreign policy and should have its own military defense. It doesn't have to be an enemy of the United States, but it doesn't have to follow blindly the United States. So that would be fine. The question is, can Europe come up with something right now? It's such a strange situation. The US led Europe into this highly militaristic approach based on the US idea that the US runs the show and will expand NATO. Europe swallowed and said, we'll go along with this. Now, Trump is saying, that wasn't a good idea. He's absolutely right on that. It's been a disaster. It led to this awful war. It is now a real crisis. So Trump is saying, I don't want to play this losing hand. But Europe, strangely enough, is saying, no, we're in it. We're going to continue the war. I don't think that they can really sustain that approach because frankly, Europe without the United States can offer very little to Ukraine in terms of military support right now. But maybe this is the beginning of a more independent European foreign policy, which on the whole would be good for Europe, good for the United States, good for world peace, in my view. But they have to get their act together.
Well, and they have to not be warmongery. I mean, what is the point of them having their own foreign policy if their foreign policy is, let's just continue this war against Russia using Ukraine as cannon fodder?
The strange thing is that it was the Germans actually going back to Willy Brandt already decades ago in what was called his Ostpolitik or Eastern policy, which said we want to go beyond the Cold War. We want to actually have a normalization of relations with the Soviet Union at the time and then with Russia afterwards. And there's, from an economic point of view, an obvious complementarity. Germany is an industrial economy. Russia has raw materials, primary commodities, natural gas to an unbelievable abundance. Those fit together for mutual benefit of Russia and the European Union. But the United States actually didn't like that. Oh, that excludes us. That gives Russia too much power. We run the show, and so on. So the U.S. actually went out to break those economic linkages. One of the most famous parts of that is destroying the Nord Stream pipeline, which I'm sure the United States did. And Germany just stood by as its industry went into deep crisis because suddenly Germany lost access to low cost natural gas. The United States waved its hand and said, we'll provide you with natural gas 6 times the price that you were
Yeah.
getting from Russia. So there was a greedy dimension to it as well. But basically, Europe went along, and the United States didn't like Russia and Western Europe having peaceful, normal economic relations. From the US point of view, that was too much power for Russia. And after all, in the neocon environment that we've lived in from 1991 until a few weeks ago, the US was supposed to call all the shots. What's interesting about Trump is that he's actually being the realist in this, saying, this approach isn't working. I don't want to double down on a losing war. Too many people are dying in Ukraine. This is too expensive for the United States. And so he's closing up the U.S. policy, which has been in place for decades. The Europeans are bewildered. They're shocked. What do we do? Oh my God, we signed up to the U.S. approach for decades. Now what do we do? And so that's why they're so confused. Most of the leaders in Europe are leaders in part because they were pro-US. So the US supported them directly or indirectly. The US bolstered them. The US gave them big celebrations when they came to the US, made them big people so that they could go home and win elections and so on. And now those people who were supporting the previous US foreign policy are lost. Uh, of course, in the end, this is a failure of Biden. This is a failure that goes back a long time, including Trump 1. We followed an approach which made no sense. The U.S. had a losing hand in this. Russia was not going to allow itself to be defeated on its own border. For the U.S., this war was a kind of game. Harsh as it is to say, it was a game of influence. We can push Russia around. We can go where we want. We can expand NATO if we want. They can't stop us. For Russia, this was seen as an existential national security issue. Well, this was
Yeah.
quite obvious to many of us for years, and it's come to pass. Now Europe needs to rethink rather urgently.
I just am really confused about Europe's reaction to this. You would think that they would celebrate and say, all right, great, end of the war. We can build our economies back up. But instead, they're saying, no, 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 we're going to rally around Ukraine and we're going to continue the war. What do you think their motivation for that actually is? Do you think it's just they think Trump is a fleeting moment in U.S. foreign policy. He's only here for 4 years, and then he's going to go away, and this is all going to start back up. So let's just stay the course until the establishment gets back into power in the United States. I mean, why wouldn't they just say, great, let's normalize and move forward?
First, there is a variety of views in Europe. We should remember that Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Hungary, Prime Minister Robert Fico in Slovakia have said, negotiate. So there are voices, and there will be more of them over time, that are in favor directly of ending the war, doing what Trump is actually doing right now. Then there are the Baltic states. They're really afraid. They're right on Russia's border. And in a way which is very odd, because I know these places. I helped them. I worked with them. I was an economic advisor in Estonia. I think I did a good job for them. They gave me a high civilian award. So just to say, they liked how I helped them. They have been extraordinarily Russophobic in their language. Now, here's a tiny country on the border of Russia, and they say every day, that is a hate-filled country. We hate them. They must be ended. Is that how you would even rationally treat a next-door neighbor? Even if the neighbor's irascible, you would probably calm down. You'd probably try to find a way, make peace. You can use my barbecue. It's okay. Don't burn down the fence and so on. But they're acting because they were so sure that America had their back that they kind of went overboard psychologically. And this is a big problem. So part of what we're hearing is the smaller states that really are afraid. They shouldn't be afraid. They should be discussing with the Russians, okay, look, we have real security issues. What are we to do to make sure that doesn't blow up in our face or your face? They're not doing that. There are other countries, strange remarks from the Danish prime minister yesterday, who said, more war is better than peace because a bad peace is very dangerous. If I were the Danish prime minister, with all respect, I'd be a little bit more concerned about Trump's eyes on Greenland, which is part of Danish territory, than I would about Putin right now. I truly don't understand what the Danish prime minister is trying to do with her rhetoric, but it's another case of a small country. They're not thinking clearly. The problem with the large countries, which typically led the way, Germany really handed over foreign policy to the United States, both under Chancellor Merkel and Olaf Scholz. So they just had an election. They're going to have a new chancellor within a few weeks. Maybe something will change. One of the interesting remarks he made just after winning the election is, we can't depend on the U.S. for our foreign policy anymore. Well, smart statement. Then we have a very unpopular president in France, another major country. In fact, the nuclear deterrence of the European Union, but the president's very unpopular right now, President Macron. In Italy, maybe Prime Minister Meloni can be part of a more constructive European approach. But remember, Europe is 27 countries. They were okay when they were just following the US line. Now it's a cacophony that we're hearing. We're just hearing shrieks. We're hearing, and they don't have an idea yet of what to do.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the statements you made is that U.S. runs Europe's foreign policy, which we've just been discussing, but Israel runs the U.S.'s foreign policy. And this is one of the fears that people have, is that we're shutting down the Ukraine war in order to pivot towards Iran, because Netanyahu would love nothing more than for us to start a war with Iran, go to war. And one of the things that you also said during your speech to the parliament was that Iraq was very directly a war for Israel. This wasn't a link or a mutuality. This was a direct war on behalf of Israel. They've laid out a plan. They want 7 different wars, and Iran is the pinnacle of that. And now they've accomplished. I mean, you got to look at the wars, the 7 wars. What were those they started off with? And they've really accomplished pretty much all of those objectives over the last couple of
Six out of
decades.
7.
Right. And the last
Six
one
out of
is
7.
the last
Iran.
is Iran. So
The story
yeah, what do you
here is
think is going to happen?
just to add a nuance to it. At the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union ended in December 1991, already the people in the White House, and Paul Wolfowitz was already there, Dick Cheney was already there in George Bush Sr.'s Department of Defense. They said at that time, okay, now we run the show. Now we can clean up the old Soviet allies, Soviet allies like Syria, like Iraq, like Libya. Now comes Netanyahu. He becomes prime minister in 1996, a few years later, and he's surrounded by American advisors, many of the same people. And they come up with a document called Clean Break. The idea of Clean Break was to put an end to any discussion of a state of Palestine. Israel's going to own the whole property, period, and no state of Palestine. But they knew something. They knew that the neighbors, especially at the time, Saddam Hussein was one, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya was another, the Iranians were a third, were supporting the Palestinians, including through arming belligerents, arming Hamas, arming Hezbollah. Now, Netanyahu had a very simple idea, crude, but simple. The simple idea was Israel's going to run the show. And if anyone opposes that, meaning it could be Assad in Syria, it could be Saddam in Iraq, it could be Gaddafi in Libya, we're going to overthrow them. But with one footnote, it's not actually us, it's our best friend, the United States. And this was American policy. And those on the inside of the Pentagon, State Department, National Security Council have said this in many, many ways. There was a very insightful, sad book written by an Air Force commander, Dennis Fritz, called Deadly Betrayal in 2024, last year, where he was tasked actually in the aftermath of the Iraq War with declassifying documents so that Douglas Feith, another of these neocons, very pro-Netanyahu neocons, could publish a book. So he had a team declassify Pentagon and other documents so that he could use it for his memoirs. So this person was responsible for that declassification. He read all of the documents. He published a book 20 years later, said it's been on his mind and his soul for 20 years, because when he read the documents, he realized how much the Iraq War was a setup, how much it was Feith and Wolfowitz and Netanyahu which were promoting this. And you go back and you watch Netanyahu, who came, for example, to Washington in October 2002 to tell the American people how wonderful the Iraq War will be. You know, everything will go well with the Iraq War because after Saddam falls, the Iranian young people are going to overthrow their regime and so forth. Netanyahu has been a cheerleader for these wars, but the idea is kind of a mix of ending the Russian alliances in the Middle East and doing Israel's bidding. This went on for a long time. When Wesley Clark, who was the NATO Supreme Commander in the 1990s under Clinton, went to the Pentagon a few days after 9/11, he was famously handed a document that said 7 wars in 5 years. This is this plan that I'm speaking about that also Dennis Fritz writes about. The 7 countries are Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. If you look at this, we've been involved either directly or through proxies in wars in 6 of those 7 countries. Lebanon till today with the Israeli occupation, overthrowing Syria, which was a project that started with Obama, overthrowing Saddam Hussein, which was the 2003 invasion, overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, which was the 2011 NATO operation illegally exceeding a mandate from the United Nations, arming the opponents of Sudan to break that country in 2. Now it's 2 countries, each one with a civil war in Sudan and in South Sudan, and Somalia funding other countries in the region to go to war in Somalia. So actually, there have been 6 of these 7 wars. It's no secret that Netanyahu's been begging for the United States to go to war with Iran. Now, you asked a few minutes ago after my long-winded response, is Trump going to do it? I don't think so. I actually don't think so. The reason I don't think so is we really can't afford to do that in this country. Trump actually gets it. We can't have another war right now. Our budget, our finances, our lack of preparedness, we got a mess on our hands. Trump actually did something extremely interesting that probably you and I would never have guessed. I certainly would never have guessed. He directed the Secretary of Defense to make deep cuts in the Pentagon. We haven't heard one president say that in 30 years till Trump. My God, I'm shocked, by the way. I didn't expect that. But to say that shows that's not exactly what you do to go to war, is call for deep cuts. Now, a second, much more difficult question is Trump going to say to Netanyahu, you do what you want, we'll provide you with some bombs, because we are shipping a lot of big bombs to Israel. Netanyahu is, he's already under an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I think that arrest warrant makes complete sense, because what Israel's been doing is absolutely unbelievably gross. And the question for me is not whether the U.S. will go to war with Iran, although that is a question I doubt it, but whether the U.S. will give a green light to Netanyahu to slaughter more people, to do ethnic cleansing in Gaza, to do ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. God, I hope not. That too would spread to a regional war. We should also remember, in case anyone's forgetting, I think it was January 17th, just 3 days before the inauguration, that Iran and Russia signed a security agreement. Going to war with Iran would be pretty damn dangerous. I don't think it's going to happen. God, I hope not. But I do know, or believe I know from 30 years of experience in this, that Netanyahu is rooting for it every day.
Well, let's hope you're right. I think I tend to be with you on that. I don't think Trump wants to go to a war. And I think what he's giving to Israel is, look, we'll clear out Gaza. We'll let you annex the West Bank. That's what you get. You don't get any more than that from us. That's a lot. And then we've got now
Yeah,
millions of people.
It would be devastating. It would be one of the great war crimes of our time. It would make America, which already it is, in my opinion, complicit in these massive war crimes. One thing that I think we should keep in mind is that more than I've ever seen in decades, the Arab states and the so-called Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is 57 Islamic majority countries, are speaking very, very, very clearly, including the Saudis, to whom Trump pays a lot of attention. And they're saying, do not do this. Don't even think about it. And they're saying there must be a Palestinian state alongside Israel. And so I actually think, strangely enough, though I have no doubt about the strength of the Israel lobby in the United States, that there could be a turning point here, just as there has been vis-a-vis Russia, that Trump could hear, don't be a patsy, don't give up your administration to outside interests, stand up for the United States and say, stop. We want peace. We want decent relations with the Arab world. Don't break that, and we're not going to war for you anymore, Bibi. That's what I'd like the President of the United States to say.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love for him to take back the country from the lobby. Professor Sachs, thank you so much
Absolutely.
for your insight, and thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you again. Hope we do it soon. Thanks.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can watch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.